Once upon a time, in a glistening pond nestled amongst tall grasses, lived a family of bouncing baby frogs. Pip, Pop, and Penelope, with their emerald green skin and bright, curious eyes, loved nothing more than splashing in the cool water and exploring their watery world. One sunny afternoon, as the dragonflies buzzed lazily overhead, Penelope, the youngest and most adventurous froglet, decided to venture beyond the familiar reeds bordering their home. She hopped cautiously across lily paths, their smooth surfaces cool and springy beneath her webbed feet. Suddenly, Penelope spotted a strange sight. Beneath the water's surface, a tangled mess of feathery green strands shimmered like a mermaid's hair. "Eek!" she cried, startled. "What's that creepy stuff?" Just then, Pip, the eldest and bravest of the siblings, paddled up beside her. "Don't be scared, Penelope," he chuckled. "That's just duckweed. It's like a tiny green blanket floating on the water." Pop, the middle child and resident know-it-all, puffed out his chest. "Those are most likely hornwort," he declared. "They're like underwater jungle gyms for tiny fish to hide in." Intrigued, Penelope hopped closer. The hornwort swayed gently, tickling her nose with its feathery tips. Suddenly, a flash of silver darted out from the feathery strands of tiny fish, sparkling like a jewel. Penelope giggled with delight. As they continued their exploration, they came across a patch of beautiful purple flowers peeking out of the water. "Wow," Penelope exclaimed. "Those look like giant blueberries." Pip grinned. "Those aren't blueberries, silly," he said. "They're called water hyacinths. They're pretty, but they can grow really fast and crowd out other plants." Penelope hopped closer, careful not to get tangled in the hyacinth's thick roots. She watched in fascination as a bright blue damselfly landed delicately on a lily pad next to a flower. Further along, they spotted tall, brown spikes emerging from the water. "Look," Pop exclaimed. "Those are cattails. They're like furry hot dogs growing in the water." Penelope giggled. The cattails did look a bit like hot dogs, but she knew better than to take a bite. She'd heard stories of grumpy bullfrogs who lived amongst the cattails, and she didn't want to meet one. Finally, they reached a cluster of large, ruffled green leaves floating on the water. "Those look comfy," Penelope said, hopping onto one. The leaf bobbed gently, cradling her like a tiny boat. "Those are most likely water lettuce," Pip informed her. "They're like inflatable beds for frogs to sunbathe on." Penelope stretched out on the cool, smooth surface, feeling the warm sun on her back. As she drifted lazily, she spotted a long, green string trailing through the water. It looked like a slimy noodle. Pop peered closer. "That's most likely Alaria," he said. "It's another type of underwater plant that provides food and shelter for little creatures." Penelope watched in awe as a tiny shrimp scurried along the Alaria, its translucent body almost invisible against the green. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, the three little frogs were exhausted from their adventure. They had discovered a whole new world beneath the water's surface, filled with fascinating plants and amazing creatures. Hopping back to their familiar lily pads, Penelope snuggled close to her siblings. "Our pond isn't so boring after all," she whispered, a contented smile on her face. "It's a whole underwater jungle waiting to be explored." From that day on, the three little frogs continued their adventures, learning more about the amazing plants and creatures that shared their watery home. The pond, once just a familiar place, became a magical world filled with endless wonder.